This Great Lakes prepping video is all about cooking with my preps. I do a lot of cooking videos, and I do a lot of videos where I'm preserving food, but I'm trying to do some more videos where I'm actually cooking things with my stored, prepped ingredients. I think that's kind of interesting, and I don't think there's quite as many videos that really talk about all the things you can do with your prepped, dried ingredients and your other shelf-stable foods. So in this video, I'm going to make my, a variation on my potato bacon soup. Not to brag, but I make a really good potato bacon soup. Of course, I normally make it out of fresh ingredients, fresh potatoes, fresh milk, fresh everything. But I want to try to sort of reproduce that recipe using all shelf-stable ingredients. They're not all going to be completely dried. I'm going to need some fat for the roux that I'm going to make. So, I could use canned butter, but I don't want to bust open an entire can of butter just for the little bit that I'll need for this. So I'll try using ordinary olive oil. And then I got my powdered milk, some powdered butter, of course all my dehydrated vegetables. So let's get started and see how this thing comes out. So real quick, let's take a look at our ingredients. First, we've of course got our olive oil. We have our cubed dehydrated potatoes, dehydrated onion, dehydrated celery, butter powder, whole milk powder. Here we've got our ham soup base, of course salt and pepper. We're going to need a little bit of flour. And you know what? I don't ordinarily use cheese of any sort in my usual potato soup recipe, but I've got this big container of white cheddar powder, and you know what? I think I'll throw just a little bit of that in. Why not? And then what do we do for the bacon? We're talking about all shelf-stable ingredients. So what better than some real bacon bits? These aren't the fake ones. These aren't those textured vegetable protein, hard as a rock, little crispy things. This is some real crumbled bacon. And I think that's going to work pretty well in place of some regular fresh bacon. The first thing I'm going to do is rehydrate my onions and celery. And to do this, I'll get a saucepan full of water boiling, and I can go ahead and add the vegetables pretty much from the beginning. Let them get up to boiling. It'll rehydrate them a little bit faster. So I'm going to use about one heaping, we'll call it quarter cup of my dehydrated onions, and about 6 tablespoons of my dehydrated celery. We'll just kind of estimate, we'll call it 6 heaping tablespoons of celery. Now these won't take terribly long to rehydrate, especially once I get this water up to a simmer, maybe around 20 minutes or so. Now the reason that I'm rehydrating these in a separate pan than the dehydrated potatoes is because I want to separate it out so I can use these and saute them a little bit. They won't saute as good as if they were fresh, but when I make my roux, I want to include these in here just so a lot of that flavor gets in there. So we'll come back when these are softened up and rehydrated. For our whole milk powder, I'll add about 3 tablespoons of the powder per cup of water. And since I need 2 cups of milk, I've got 6 tablespoons of the powder in there, and I'll add just a little more than 2 cups of water. What I'm going to do is actually transfer this now into a small gravy shaker. right, there we've got about 2 cups of whole milk. All right, and since these potatoes are going to take a while to rehydrate, I'm going to go ahead and get them started now in the water. So I got my cubed dehydrated potatoes, and I'm going to go with about 2 cups. I won't be exact, like usual. Now, I haven't really measured out the amount of water that's in here because I just want to make sure that the potatoes have plenty to rehydrate with. Now, once they're nice and softened up and rehydrated, I'll strain them out of there and then make sure that I put the proper amount of water back in, which will be the basis for our broth. So I'll let these get up to simmer and soak for a while. All right, our onions and celery are pretty well rehydrated and nice and soft. And I'll let them sit here on this plate for a little while and just cool down a little bit. I may wring these out a little bit in a dish towel. I haven't decided yet. I don't want them to be too sopping wet when I begin sauteing them to make the roux. So we'll see how they go. I'm going to let those potatoes continue to simmer for a while, and when they're getting close, I'll see how these are looking. Well, these potatoes have been rehydrating for about an hour or so, and they're getting pretty soft. So I'm going to move on to the next part, which is sauteing the vegetables and making a roux. So I'll start with about 5 tablespoons of olive oil. I'll let this heat for a moment before throwing in the onions and celery. All right. Now, I didn't end up wringing these vegetables out anymore. I just sort of let them sit for a while. They still got moisture, as you can hear, but they weren't really dripping wet. Now, when you saute fresh onions and celery, you kind of go until they're a little bit translucent and soft. But since these were basically boiled for an hour, they're pretty soft. So I'll just sort of saute these until they stop sizzling so much. When I know, a lot of that water is kind of cooked out of them. Just a couple minutes, probably. There's no doubt that this would be tastier with butter. But the objective here is to use all shelf-stable pantry items. All right, we got about 5 tablespoons of flour here, and I'm not sure if I'll add all of it quite yet. I probably will. I may even need a little more, but we're just going to play this by ear a little bit. Yeah, I don't think I'll quite use the whole 5 tablespoons. Probably about 3.5 to 4. I'll let this cook for just a couple minutes, and then I'll start adding my milk. We got our 2 cups of reconstituted powdered milk, and I'll start adding this in and adding it little by little and stirring it as we go. I'm sure I'll make a huge mess in the process. What we're hoping to end up with is a nice, thick, cream-style sauce. It's looking pretty good. That'll keep thickening up a little bit as we go. And I'll get the other pot with the potatoes in it going again, and we'll start adding our ingredients to that. All right, I strained the potato water out because it was getting pretty cloudy from having all those things soak in there, and I kind of want to start with clean water. I'm going to add 3 cups of fresh water. Now the last thing I'll do to this cream sauce part of it is add about 2 tablespoons of powdered butter, just to give it a little buttery flavor. This won't do very good for fat content, but we can still get some of that flavor in there. And I'll move this over to the other burner and just let it kind of simmer here while we're working on the potatoes and the broth. Right, now we're going to add the ham base powder, the salt, the pepper, and our bacon bits. Now, I don't know exactly how much of this stuff to add. Normally I go with about 4 strips of thick cut bacon. So there's 4.3 ounces in this whole package. I'm not sure if I'll put the whole package in. I think I'll maybe go about half and then see what it looks like. You know what? I'll put some more in. Not quite the whole bag, but almost the whole bag. Maybe about 3/4. You know, I could have also added the bacon bits to the cream sauce, but because it is dehydrated, I figured it wouldn't hurt to let it sort of simmer in this broth for at least a little bit while it goes. And once I mix everything together, all the flavors will blend pretty well anyway. So I'll let this sit here and simmer for just a little bit. It doesn't need to go too long because the potatoes are already soft. Normally at this stage is when you would soften up your fresh potatoes. But I don't need to do a whole lot of that. I'll probably give this just about 10 minutes. Alright, it's been about 10 minutes. I've got this pot on about a low simmer. And now it's just time to add the cream vegetable mix. I know this isn't the same as everybody makes potato soup, but this recipe I've been making a long time, well, at least with the fresh ingredients. And it's sort of a half broth, half milk-based soup. And it comes out just really delicious. I really enjoy how it all mixes together. There we go. I'm going to let this mixture here simmer for just a little bit. But first, I'll put in my last ingredient, which is a little bit of this white cheddar powder. I don't know exactly how much to use, so I'll just go with, I don't know, we'll call it a couple of really heaping teaspoons. Stir that in really well. I'll give this, I don't know, maybe about 10 minutes to simmer and really absorb in that cheese and thicken up just a tiny bit more. And then I'll serve some up and give it a try. And here we go. Here is the final product. I have to say it looks pretty decent. It looks not too far off from the fresh version. I will say it's a little thinner than I would have liked. I think that reconstituted powdered milk doesn't quite do it as well as the real thing. And if I do this again, I think I would not quite use as much of that milk. I should have paid a little closer attention when I was thinning out the roux and making that sauce. But yeah, I think overnight in the fridge, this will thicken up a lot more, and I'll like that. I gave it a sample, and the flavor, it's not bad. It's you know, it's definitely not the same thing as the fresh. I feel like I can taste that powdered milk. You know, it's got this flavor to it that you can't quite escape. It's not going to be the same thing as the fresh milk. The bacon bits, I think, made this a little saltier than I would have liked. Somehow saltier than just regular fresh bacon. I think the potatoes and all the other vegetables rehydrated quite nicely. You know, the flavor's not bad. It's not the same. I'd say I might only like it about half as much as the original version. But the point of this is to try things out with the prepped ingredients and see what I could make, you know, if that's what I'm relying on. And I could see making potato soup like this when I can't get fresh ingredients. I'd probably be pretty happy to have it. That being said, I don't know if I'd make this one again. Otherwise, I think I would stick with the fresh ingredients. But you know what? Sometimes things come together a little bit better after they've sat in the fridge for a night. So let me see how well this thickens up, and I'll give it another shot tomorrow. But for now, that's what we have. Let me know if you've made a similar kind of a concoction with your dried or shelf-stable ingredients. So that's about it for now. Thanks for watching, and until next time, this is Great Lakes Prepping.